It happens without warning. You're washing dishes, or sitting in traffic, or just about to fall asleep. And then it arrives. Something from years ago. A sentence you said that landed wrong. A moment in front of people where something slipped. A conversation you replayed 100 times back then and apparently haven't finished replaying yet. You can feel it even now. The warmth in your face. The small internal wince. You might even say something out loud. A word or a sound. Some reflex to shake it loose before it settles in. And somewhere in the middle of it, you probably wonder the same thing everyone wonders. Why is this still here? Why, out of everything that has actually happened since then, is this one of the things your brain chose to keep? The answer isn't that you're broken or unusually sensitive or worse at letting things go than other people. The answer is that your brain is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It's just that what it was designed to do and what you actually need from it right now are two very different things. Your brain has a built-in bias for threat, not because anything is wrong with you, but because this is how human nervous systems have worked for as long as humans have existed. Positive experiences don't register the same way negative ones do, because positive experiences don't need to be learned from urgently. If something goes well, that's useful information. But if something goes badly, especially something social, something that risks your standing in a group, your brain treats that as information that needs to be retained, reviewed, and made available again quickly. Because for most of human history, being rejected by a group wasn't just embarrassing. It was genuinely dangerous. Social rejection in a prehistoric environment could mean being left without food, protection, or community. The brain that learned from social failure quickly was the brain that survived. And so your nervous system evolved to encode socially threatening moments with a particular kind of grip, one that makes them easier to access, easier to replay, and much harder to simply let dissolve the way pleasant memories do. Psychologists call this negativity bias, the asymmetry between how deeply negative experiences are encoded compared to positive ones of equivalent intensity. A compliment received on the same day as a public stumble will be significantly less retrievable a week later than the stumble, not because the compliment mattered less, but because the stumble carried a social threat signal, and the compliment didn't. The brain allocates memory resources the way a survival system allocates any resource, toward what could keep you alive, not toward what felt good. The embarrassing moment from 8 years ago that still makes you wince isn't stuck because you're weak. It's stuck because your brain correctly identified it as high-value survival data. The problem is that the threat it was cataloged under no longer exists, but the catalog hasn't been updated. When you're not focused on anything in particular, not in the middle of a task or conversation, your brain shifts into what neuroscientists call the default mode network. This is a constellation of brain regions that becomes active precisely when your attention isn't directed outward. You know it as the mental background noise that starts up the moment you're idle. Daydreams, future scenarios, memories. The thing you should have said in that argument 2 years ago. The default mode network is specifically associated with self-referential thinking, the brain processing information about you, your past, your relationships, your social standing. And embedded within it is the hippocampus, the region most responsible for storing and retrieving autobiographical memories. When the default mode network activates, the hippocampus begins surfacing memories that are emotionally tagged, especially those tagged as socially significant, which means that the moment you're at rest, the most accessible memories your brain reaches for are precisely the ones that carry the most social and emotional charge. The embarrassing moment isn't surfacing randomly. It's surfacing because it's one of the most emotionally tagged files in the archive, and your brain in rest mode is effectively doing a sweep of its most flagged content. Now here's the part that makes this stranger. In the same year they named the phenomenon, 1999, a pair of psychologists named Thomas Gilovich and Kenneth Savitsky published a study at Cornell University that revealed something quietly devastating about these moments we can't stop replaying. They called it the spotlight effect. Their experiment was simple. They asked students to enter a room wearing a t-shirt featuring a face that had been pre-tested as embarrassing to be associated with. The students wearing the shirts were asked to estimate how many people in the room had noticed what they were wearing. Their estimates were nearly double the actual number. The wearers thought that roughly half the room had registered the shirt. Fewer than a quarter actually had. The spotlight effect is the name for this gap. The consistent, measurable tendency for humans to overestimate how much other people notice their mistakes, their missteps, their appearance, their stumbles. It shows up across dozens of experiments and dozens of contexts. We believe we are far more visible in our worst moments than we actually are. And this matters for the embarrassing memories that won't leave you alone. Because the version of the event stored in your brain is the version filtered through your own perspective, through a nervous system that was fully inside the experience, feeling every second of it, registering every imagined glance, cataloging every imagined reaction. The people who were supposedly watching weren't inside the experience the same way. Most of them moved on within seconds. Many of them don't remember it at all. The memory that keeps returning is enormous to you because you lived it from the inside. It was never that enormous to anyone else. There's one more layer worth understanding, because it explains why replaying the memory never seems to help even when it feels like you're trying to work through it. The replay itself is called rumination, and psychologists who study it have found that rumination doesn't function the way problem-solving does. When you genuinely solve a problem, you close it. The cognitive loop completes. But rumination doesn't complete anything. It recirculates. It returns to the same footage from the same angle without adding new information, without reframing, without resolution. And each time it runs, it reactivates the emotional charge attached to the memory, keeping the file fresh and easily accessible rather than allowing it to fade. The goal isn't to replay it until you've understood it well enough that the shame finally releases. That's not how shame works. Shame doesn't release through review. It releases through context, through compassion, through recognizing that the person who lived through that moment was doing their best inside a set of pressures and limitations they didn't fully choose. What actually helps the memory lose its grip is not running the footage again. It's changing what the footage means. The event itself is not going to be rewritten, but the interpretation placed on it. What it says about who you are, what it says about how others saw you, what it says about your worth in the moment since, all of that is far more flexible than the memory itself. One thing worth trying when the memory surfaces is simply naming what's happening rather than engaging with its content. Not reviewing the footage again, but noticing, my brain is surfacing a threat-tagged file right now. That's what this is. That small act of labeling the mechanism rather than inhabiting the memory, creates a different kind of distance from it. Not suppression, but perspective. The memory is doing its job. The job is no longer necessary. Those two things can both be true at once. You are not the center of everyone's attention in that moment, however much it felt that way. The room moved on. The people moved on. The memory stayed because your brain built it to stay, not because it was as defining as it felt. And the you who lived through that moment, the one who said the wrong thing or stumbled or went red in front of the room, was not a different or lesser version of you. They were you, in a moment of being human, in a room full of other people who were also managing their own private collections of moments they wish they could undo. The wince, when it comes, doesn't mean the memory still matters in the way it once seemed to. It just means your brain still has it filed under the wrong category.